Well, everyone, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome the legendary himself, Joe Foster. Joe and his family have been handcrafting running shoes since the late 19th century, supplying the likes of the awesome and very well-known Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams. Later, immortalised in the film Chariots of Fire. I'm pretty sure a lot of people would know that movie, as well as providing boots to most football league clubs. Joe, since founding Reebok, has been known for its excellent running shoes. Its big break came thanks to the aerobics craze of the 1980s. Soon, Reeboks were on Hollywood's red carpet, on the feet of rock stars, and even played a starring role in Aliens when Sigourney Weaver took down extraterrestrials in a pair of Reebok alien stompers. That is incredible. You've got a new book out, Joe, called Shoemaker, which tells us the inspiring story revealing the grit, hard choices, and personal sacrifices that go into creating a world-beating brand. Joe, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Storybox podcast today.
Well, Jay, hello. That's quite an introduction, that. Nice to speak to you. And it is very nice, yes.
Hopefully I didn't butcher it, but I appreciate your time, sir, and been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I appreciate you rescheduling, and glad we can make it happen. Before we dive into your backstory and how you got started doing all this and why you do what you do, I have one question that I normally love asking people, and I'm very curious about your answer. But what do you think, or what does success look like to you?
Success is something that it's difficult to pinpoint, because you take this journey step by step. And step by step, you get something better, something more successful. But it takes time. It's like maybe if you're an athlete and you come out of nowhere and win a gold medal, that may be astonishingly quick. But for me, it took 30 years. So 30 years to success is, and let me say also, I've been retired 30 years. So surprisingly enough, possibly writing this book makes me realize, that trip was successful. So I look back on that now and I think, and sometimes I think, how did you do it? You know, we were young when we started, and at 23, you sort of totally undefeatable. You go out into life and you've no fears, no worries. So what does success look like? Well, it's very nice to look back, although there are many things, there are many tragedies and sorrows through it. So that does temper it. But it's something that I say, when you're doing things, it's hard to believe. I guess when we became number one, you feel that you've made it. This is something beyond our dreams.
What would you say has been, or can you share some of the stories, challenges that you faced when you first started out or along the journey?
Well, the journey is a long one. It really is. And if you want to start the journey, you've got to start with my grandfather back in 1895, when he made himself a pair of running shoes with spikes in. And in 1895, nobody had spikes. So how much of a pioneer he was is hard to say, but he certainly was a pioneer. That started his business. And by 1900, he actually had his business, J.W. Foster's. In the 20s, the 1920s, that was his belle epoque. That's where he had all the success. You were mentioning Eric Liddell, Harold Abrahams, and Lord Burleigh, and the Chariots of Fire. He had so many gold medals in those days. He was supplying Olympic teams. In 1920, he supplied all the Olympic teams at the Antwerp Games. So we go on from there. Unfortunately, he died when he was young. He died in 1933. I wasn't born until 1935. But I was born on his birthday in 1935, which is why I took his name. So he was Joe Foster, I am Joe Foster. Well, we're all JWs, actually. It runs through the family. So Joseph William is the name. And I joined the company, the J.W. Foster Company, in 1952. Because in 1953, both Jeff, my brother, and myself, we had to do national service in those days. So we were away doing national service for 2 years. 1955, we come back. Now, this is where my story really starts, I suppose. We come back from doing national service, and we come back to a company that's failing. My uncle and father were running the company then. Granddad, let's say he died. They were running the company, and it was failing. They were still making shoes that they made in the 30s and 40s. Jeff had been in Germany, and in Germany, of course, Adidas, Puma, he could see what they were doing. He could see colourful shoes. He could see development of product, and Foster's were still making the same shoes. It took us 3 years of trying to persuade father and uncle, come on, we've got to move this company on. We have to start a plan, and we have to develop. But they were feuding. They would prefer to have a fight rather than get together and talk. So by 1958, we'd had enough, and we said, no, we're going. So we left the company. We left the company. We set up our own company, which was then Mercury Sports Footwear in the next town.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there, or a lot to unbox, I should say. One of the questions that I do have for you is, why was your father's company, or why was that company really failing?
Well, it was failing because when I think grandfather, he obviously had a vision, but he didn't pass his vision on to his sons. So when his sons came to run the company, they were happy just to continue the company going. And they didn't have a vision. They didn't. It's like when you get to the top of the mountain, where do you go next? They didn't know where the next mountain was. You know, they didn't know that. They hadn't had that sort of education. There was no such thing as business education in those days. You either had it in you or you didn't. And obviously, they didn't. And there was about 5 years between them. And during that 5 years, they'd obviously, well, that gap, they were not friends. They were brothers, but not friends. They worked together, but they didn't work together. They didn't work as a team. And because they didn't work as a team, and because the business that my grandfather had grown was so good, it just kept them going. It kept their business going. But they couldn't see when it was dying. They couldn't see it. and that was the problem. Jeff and myself, possibly we wouldn't have seen it had we not had to do national service. But national service took us away from family. Mother's not making you dinner anymore. And, things like that. The family's not got its arm around you. You've got to look after yourself. So you probably sit up, take a look around and think, oh, this is a big wide world. What's it about? And it was about more than J.W. Foster's. So when we couldn't get them to talk and to reason. They were just, in fact, my father said, look, your uncle's not going to live long, and when I go, this company will be yours. And of course, all I could say was, well, Dad, that may be fine, but what? We don't want you to die. That's not the purpose. But this company will be dead long before you are. And but he wouldn't take that on. And so, as I say, our only answer to this was to leave the J.W. Foster company.
There's an old saying where there is no vision, the people perish. And I think your grandfather, it's a bit of a shame that he ended up passing on and not actually passing on that vision. But I guess if he did, do you think that Reebok would be where it is today?
Well, I think he did pass his vision on, but it did not to his sons. I think we look back and we saw what grandfather had done. And so I guess it was in our DNA. I guess we had something there that said, grandfather did this. He had that vision. He had a mission. Unfortunately, his sons didn't, which means, and I think, therefore, J.W. Foster's really, really lost out at that point. We were supplying every football club you can mention in the UK. There was 96 teams with training shoes and boots. Now, by the time Jeff and I came to the business, Adidas had taken that role. Adidas was supplying everybody. Adidas was in every shop. So, to say, we needed to change. We couldn't change. because it just wouldn't move. And the only way we could do was to leave and set up our own company.
When you did leave and went to start up your own company, did you have any fears at all?
Well, I mean, the funny thing about that is now I'd be scared to death of doing it now. I look back and I think, oh, Joe, how did you do that? Why did you no money? We really so little money. I mean, it was hand to mouth. All our machinery was secondhand. However, what we did do in those 3 years between leaving the National Service and starting up our own company, we went to college to learn. And this was in the evenings. We went in the evenings to college to learn about shoemaking and learn about materials, machinery. And so that gave us a skill that combined with what we knew about the sports business, because whilst we were making shoes, we were in the shoe industry, but we were selling our product to the sports industry, which was quite a lot different. So we learned a lot, and we also had a lot of friends. So a lot of people said, "What? You set up your own company?" And so they would help us. They'd help us with pattern making, help us with last making, all the skills that we needed. We learned in that 3 years, so that when we moved, we were pretty well prepared. But we're 20. I was 23. Jack was 25, and we were just indestructible. We can do it.
You kind of have that mindset as a young person, don't you? I'm 24 at the moment. I feel unstoppable.
Absolutely. Well, it's like Casey. He's unstoppable as well.
I know. He just keeps going. It always amazes me, like the kind of people that he gets on his show. But I have this saying that I live by. It's my philosophy, Joe, which is be persistent to remain consistent at the things that you want. And for me in order to get anywhere in any capacity in my life, my version ultimately of success is really being persistent, because without persistence, I wouldn't be able to get anywhere. Like I'd quit before I'm able to reach the diamond, so to speak. So it sounds like to me, you guys, you had that persistence, even though you might not have realized it then. You just had that drive, that energy of we are building something truly unique and special. We want to make it happen.
Yeah. I think it's probably the first building block of an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Persistence. Yeah, you might not be brilliant, you might not have all the answers, but you want to stay there and keep doing it because you will learn and you will get there. But you have to be persistent. Absolutely, it has to be, and you have to be in love with what you're doing as well.
100%. Yeah, I wouldn't change what I'm doing now for anything, Joe. Honestly, like it's an amazing thing, amazing experience. I get to connect with you all the way over in France right now. It's a really amazing thing. I get to hear your story. And I'm a huge fan of Reebok. I'm wearing Reebok shorts now. I've got Reebok shoes. I've got Reebok pretty much everything except for this. Do you even? But I probably should have worn my Reebok shirt too. So, but Joe, I'm curious. I read in somewhere online that you guys were living in a factory. Is that correct? And what happened there?
That is correct. When we left the business, of course, I sold the property I had. That probably gave us some money. I sold my house, and the building we rented was an old brewery. It was a Berry Brewing Company, and the old brewery has 3 floors, and they also had living accommodation at the front. It was a living accommodation. So, and the living accommodation wasn't too bad. It wasn't terrible. Wasn't the best. But then again, you don't see it. You're going there to do the work. Possibly my wife saw it. But yeah, I don't see it. I'm just living here. I've got a job to do. And you're getting on. The job is focus. But yes, we lived on the building. And I'm J.W. Foster. I married a Jean. It's a J. Foster. My brother was Jeffrey William Foster, or J.W. Foster, and he married a Jean Foster. So can you imagine the postman?
So whose letters who?
Yes, and the taxman. It was good because the taxman didn't know who was talking to him.
Oh, that would have been fun.
It was great fun. I think at the time, though, our wives in particular found it a bit of a problem because, and so that's why our children would never JWs. It was, no, we're not having any more JWs. But when you look back on that, that's part of the tradition, part of that magic that sort of makes things a little different.
Absolutely. I have one of my final questions later on is towards legacy. So I'm curious to know your answer to that. But I'm even more curious about, you mentioned your wife there, you were married when you started this. How did you go about meeting your wife, and what was your wife's reaction to, we're going to start this business and we're going to live in a factory? You sold your house to live in a factory to get this done.
Well, she was very supportive at the time. And I think she was pretty much tired of me coming home at night working at J.W. Foster's and just complaining, moaning, we can't do this. We've got to do change. We need to. I think she was probably more persuaded that I should leave and we should do it, because at least I'll stop moaning and stop complaining. So yes, she was. And again, she was 1 year younger than me. So again, at 22, you're indestructible. And particularly, life is still in front of you. So you make it. You make of it what you can. And I guess she probably preferred me being happy and not having any money than just earning a small wage and being, well, I won't say being miserable, because that wasn't the answer. No, it was just sort of there was something inside that said, we've got to change.
Mm. And how did you meet her? Like, what was the story for that?
Well, back in those days, we're talking about back in the late 40s, early 50s, everybody went to the local dance hall. Mm. So, that was it. I played badminton, which was fine. That was my sport. But at weekends, everybody went either to the local church used to have dances, and then, of course, we grew up and went to the one in town, to the bigger dances, and that's where we met.
Mm. What's been the biggest lesson that she's taught you over the years that you hold dear to your heart?
Oh, well, that's an odd question. I don't know whether she taught me anything or not. It's the biggest lesson that she would taught me. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. It's I guess my focus was more on the business. There's probably something in there, but and I don't think that's in the book. Look, if that comes to me whilst we're talking, I'll answer that question.
Oh, of course. I'm curious about one thing that you could have put in the book, but you didn't put in the book, that you could share here.
If it could have gone in the book, it would have been writable. There's a lot of things in life which you can't write about. There are many anecdotes as well, which the publishers, when you write the book, and it took me 7 years to write a book, and there's nothing new in the book from that 7 years. There are a few things not in the book from that 7 years, purely and simply because I'm a shoemaker or an entrepreneur or whatever you want to be, a marketing man. When it comes to writing a book, you have to have certain things in and certain things not in, because they get concerned that it becomes boring because I have too many anecdotes of this happening and that happening. No. You tell the story. So there are lots of things that don't get in the book, purely and simply because they consider them more anecdotal. And one thing, and I don't think it is in the book, because I was due to go to America to the NSGA show. Fortunately, the NSGA show used to be 3 years in Chicago in February. I don't know. You've obviously not been there because you've not been on a plane. No. But Chicago in February is minus 20 degrees. It is cold. But on this year, every fourth year, they used to go down to Houston, which is Houston in Texas. Well, totally different, hot, wonderful weather. But on this occasion, I was due to go on a week before I was due to go and playing badminton. And I break my Achilles tendon. My Achilles tendon just went. I'm in hospital. And I'm saying to the guy, look, I'm due in America in 7 days' time, and what can I do about this? And it's not saying, oh, well, that evening I had the operation where they sew it all together, because if you don't repair your Achilles tendon, you end up with a limp for the rest of your life. So I have the operation. I get the plaster on, and I've got I think about 4 days to go to taking a plane to Houston, and the guy said, well, if you can manage with crutches, that'll be fine. So I managed with crutches, but I had an athlete friend, because they had crutches then that went under your armpits, and I had a friend who got these elbow crutches. So we swapped the crutches as I was getting on the plane. And the plane was going from Manchester to London, and then London on to Houston. And of course, this is a national sporting goods. So everybody in the UK who were to do with the sporting trade, they were all on the plane. And a lot of them were friends. And so they were all saying, what are you doing, Joe? Well, I play band, or it was like, what's the other guy like? So this was great. They gave me 3 seats to myself. So I had a row to myself. And when we got on the plane from London to Houston, a friend of mine came and sat, and we had a chat. And I arrived in Houston. They said I got the wheelchair, got me off, and they said to my friend, are you with him? And he said, yes, I'm with him. So we went past all the people in lines as you go through immigration in America, past all that, through. And he said, Joe, we should make a plaster cast like this. He said, we could smuggle all sorts of things into the country. He just wheeled me through. But, those sort of things, like I say, it's anecdotal. Does it do any good for the story? Well, the people said no. But, yes.
It does make good hearing that. It gave me a bit of a laugh. So I'm curious about this one question I ask people just to see their response. But what would you say, Joe, has been the worst piece of advice you've ever received from someone?
Oh, there's a lot of that. And I would say probably the worst was the accountants. We're doing very nicely, and we have all the shares for the company. And the accountant says the best thing to do is to give some of the shares to the family. Then if you should sort of pass away, they don't have to pay tax on it if they've had that for 7 years. And that wasn't good advice. I didn't do it. And it would have happened because unfortunately, my daughter died when she was only 28. And those, if I'd have passed shares on, those would have gone, and her husband remarried and things. So that would have, that sort of advice, you sit down and you think, well, it sounds good. Sounds great, but what happens if something happens that shouldn't happen? Like your daughter shouldn't die. So to me, and I think the problem with accountants are they do things by a book, and that book is okay for them at that time, but doesn't work for everybody. So it's bad advice. Is people, particularly financially, people can say things, but life changes a lot. So you've got to take some deep thinking before you do it.
I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I do want to ask how your daughter ended up passing away.
She got leukemia. And it was leukemia that took her. It was she had a very nice time. We introduced to a lot of people, but no, leukemia, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry. I've got a couple of friends of mine that actually have passed away with leukemia. Growing up, a small little boy who was just full of joy, and we used to go and see him all the time. and unfortunately, he ended up passing away. And that was like the first time I ever witnessed death. And as a young boy, like that really changes you a little bit. And I've been
It's tough.
exposed. It's very tough. Like I've been exposed to a lot of loss as well in my young 24 years in life. But the one thing that I go back to is keep on smiling no matter what. It's okay. And
Well, you have to. I mean, you do have to keep on smiling. You have to keep on moving forward as well. You can't sit there with your head in your hands.
right.
And that happened when my brother died. Jeff died when he was only 50. No, he was 47. And it was just at the time when we'd broken into America. And he would have had a big role in production. He ran the factory. I did the rest of but he ran the factory, and that's what he loved doing. But when we did break into America, we needed to increase production. We couldn't do it in our factory. Our factory was too small. So I had a friend at Barter. Barter, probably the biggest shoemakers in the world. Right? They had a factory down in London, and they would make some shoes for us, take up the volumes, which meant a lot of work in taking our styles and all our patterns thing down to them and getting them to run to the patterns. But unfortunately, that's what Jeff should have been doing. It ended up that I had to do it in the end. Well, it didn't really get done that well. And that is another story, because my desire was to get into America. The running business, the athletics business in the UK and in fact the Commonwealth, because surprisingly enough, we had contacts all over the world, but through the Commonwealth. And that came because of all runners read Athletics Weekly, which was a magazine produced in the UK. And so whether you're in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even in India, the Athletics Weekly was quite a Bible to people. And our advertising got us a business. So we were doing business around the world, and I've lost the thread where it was going on that one. But yeah, so Jeff was due to go down to Barter to take the patterns, and he didn't. And I had to take a young man out to Barter and try and teach him what to do. But I think I was going to America that caused this, because I said the market in the UK was small. I went to America first time in 1968. And in 1968, NSGA show, Chicago. And I continued to go until 1979. Well, I went after that one. But in 1979, that's when I met Paul Fireman. Mm-hmm. But I needed to get into the market, and I needed to find the key. And the key happened to be Runner's World. Now, Runner's World in America, that really was the Bible. Everybody read this magazine. So if you were in the magazine, they would see your product. And Bob Anderson, who ran the magazine, it was his publication, he used to rate shoes once a year. They had a shoe edition. And after a fairly difficult start, he eventually went to a star rating for your shoes. At first, he started giving the 1, 2, 3, 4, but whoever became number one could never, ever produce enough shoes in that time. Suddenly the magazine comes out and everybody reads it and everybody wants you a shoe. It takes you 6 months to gear up to get a shoe for that sort of demand. So he changed that to being a star rating. 5 stars was the best. So the key for me was to get a 5-star rated shoe, which we did. I actually designed the Aztec specifically to get a 5-star rating, which was that was the object of the mission. It did get a 5-star rating, but early 1979, before the star rating came out, I had the shoe. We'd had it at the Edmonton Games, the Commonwealth Games, done very well. I had it on exhibition at the NSGA, National Sporting Goods Show in Chicago, and I had so many people who loved it. I also had an offer of 25,000 pairs from Kmart. Kmart are probably one of the biggest of these wholesalers, and well, they're just big stores. Kmart in America, they wanted 25,000 pairs. Well, 25,000 pairs was about 6 months' work for our factory in the UK. That's one of the reasons we needed to increase our production somewhere. And also Paul Feynman was there, and Paul Feynman, he loved the shoe, loved the idea. And he said, Joe, he said, I'd like to be the distributor in America. He said, but we need a 5-star shoe. And I said, Paul, I think we have a 5-star shoe. But we had to wait till August before the shoe edition came out. And I phoned Paul that morning and said, Paul, go get a runner's wool from the kiosk and see how we did. Mm. And it's about an hour after I'd phoned him, he came back and said, Joe, he said, Aztec, we've got 5 stars. Brilliant. But we also had 5 stars for our other 2 shoes as well, the Spike and the racing shoe. That was the Inca and Midas. So we had Aztec, Inca, and Midas. We called it the Gold Range. And that was it. That was the key. And obviously the door was Paul Feynman. So that's how we broke into the American market. But if I want to go back to barter, if Jeff had been able to go down there and spend some time with them, what happened probably wouldn't have happened. And that is, they made 20,000 pairs, which they shipped over to Paul Feynman in America. And Paul is on the phone about a month later saying, Joe, these shoes are coming back. We have a problem. And the cushion, the midsole was collapsing. Not everyone, didn't all collapse, but we went to see Barter. And Barter was such a big shoe company, they had their own rubber factory. And in their rubber factory, they were making this new material, which we were using, not from them, but EVA, which is a different material from just rubber. And they obviously hadn't cured it for long enough, so there was a batch that was failing. Fortunately, not all the shoes fell apart, but Paul Feynman ended up not paying for those shoes because they were so faulty. So we had 20,000 pairs of shoes, which probably helped him in a way because it kept him going until we could get production in South Korea. Because the one thing that Kmart wanted, they wanted 20,000 pairs, but they wanted them at a better price, much better price than we could produce. And I took a trip to South Korea. I took a trip around the world. My first around the world trip at that point. And they were making good shoes. So they were okay. But we had to wait till that came on board. And this 20,000 pairs from Barter, although they were not the best, they at least kept those orders going until we could get South Korea moving.
What an incredible story. That's all I can say. What an incredible story. Like, so much experience, so much has happened in the years leading up to Reebok being what it is today. And I'm curious, you got like all these other, I guess shoe manufacturers, these brands that are popping up. What made Reebok different to the others?
What made us different? Well, I think when you said there was a lot of people in America, there were people popping up. Runner's World, I think, helped Nike grow because it helped the business, or it helped the category of running grow tremendously quickly. And Nike grew with it. But also you had New Balance, Brooks, Saucony, Etonic. They were smaller companies, but they were growing. What helped? Why would Reebok? Well, Reebok did get a 5-star. Well, that makes a difference. I think also what helped, and this was quite surprising, when I went to see Paul and we talked about the shoe in America, we had our logo at that time because we changed from Mercury to Reebok. That in itself is a different story. But with Reebok, we had the Union Jack with Reebok and then the Union Jack. At first, though, we had was the Star Crest. And it's still, if you've got a pair of classics, the Star Crest is on the tongue. And that was on the side of the shoe with Reebok and then the Starglass. And Paul said to me, Joe, he said, well, it's going to cost us millions to get people to recognize this as as our logo. Can we use the Union Jack? And I said, why, Paul? He said, everybody in America knows the Union Jack, which surprised me. Everybody in America would know the Union Jack, but it seemed they did. And it was a fantastic point of sale because we started putting the Union Jack on the side, and we also, that's on each shoe, so the Union Jack on each shoe and the box. And the box was fantastic because the lid was just a Union Jack. So we had the shoes with the Union Jack and lid. Now, at that time, it was early days in America. We didn't have any point of sale material. We didn't have any posters or whatever, or even stands to put your shoes on. So what the retailers did, and I'm pretty sure that they were sort of given the idea, maybe one started, but I'm sure our reps passed it on. But they would put the shoe boxes on the side so that the Union Jack faced outwards, and they would make a pyramid of these boxes, and then they put shoes on top of the boxes to display them, and that was sensational. Everybody loved that. It was sort of an organic way of point of sale. So, and when you say, well, what was the difference? Why did it happen? There are all these little bits and pieces that make these things happen. A 5-star shoe, the Union Jack, the use of it as a point of sale. And then I guess we were not that much better than anybody else until a guy called Arnold Martinez. I don't know if you've heard of Arnold. Arnold Martinez, he was a tech rep down in Los Angeles. And he's been in Los Angeles. His wife, Frankie, she was going to these aerobic classes with her girlfriends, and they were loving it. And Arnold said, oh, what's so special about this? And she said, well, we're exercising to music, but it's popular music, it's the dance music, we're exercising to music. So Arnold said, well, I'm going to come along and have a look. What are you doing? And it's mainly women, if not all women at that time. It was a woman's thing. But he went along there, and the instructors were in a pair of running shoes. And half the class are either in running shoes or plimsolls. The others are barefoot, no shoes at all. For him, that was a light bulb moment. He saw, why don't we produce a shoe, a glove-like shoe, just like French glove, because for the women, nice and cushioned, so that they can do the aerobics. I don't suppose he really thought that it would catch on the way it did, but he went to Paul Fireman and said, Paul, why don't we make a shoe for this new aerobics category that's happening down in LA? And of course, it's new. And Paul said, no, look, we've got a good business. This running business is keeping us we're really doing well with it. Why do you want to play around with something that a few girls are dancing about in down in Los Angeles? However, Arnold went round his back and went to the production people and had a word with production, and they made him 200 pairs. And he gave them away to the instructors and some of the girls down there in LA, and they just loved them. Okay, they'd used glove leather, which wasn't the ideal at all. It burst away in no time. You can rip good, just like paper. You can tear glove leather. It was cured. We did get a better leather slightly down the road. But if that had have happened in the UK, we would have been out of business. But the girls in Los Angeles, no, they didn't care. They'd go buy another pair because they loved them so much. And that just slow progress at first. Once it caught fire, it went global. The company went from $9 million revenues to 30 million to 90 million to 300 million to 900 million in successive years. So, and this really, whilst we had a nice business with running and it expanded into other things like tennis, the aerobics scene really exploded the company. And it not only did it grow that fast, it went street. It had to do that volume. Everybody, the girls just wanted to wear the shoe, whether they were doing aerobics or not. And so at that point, Reebok became known really as a woman's shoe company. We were making a special sports shoe for women, just for women. Adidas, Nike, they were male. They were sweaty. All of a sudden, Reebok is this beautiful woman's company. So you got to add all these things together to say why. And it's a lot of things.
I love the progression, because sometimes that's all it takes. Take one idea, one person even, and then all of a sudden it just can explode. And you don't even know when it's going to, but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I just love this story, man. Like it is such a profound story, especially with a brand that I love today and have loved for quite some years. And not like, I'm going to be honest with you, Joe, I didn't even know that it was designed specifically for women. That's just being honest. And I don't know how I feel about that now. But truthfully, you know, like I think what you've done with the company is very admirable. And two more questions for you, Joe, if you don't mind, because I want to be respectful of your time. One of them, why did you decide to leave the company after such a long time?
Well, I mean, I think you just put it in words then, after such a long time. A long time. And it was a very exciting ride. It was a very exciting time. We grew, we did all sorts of things and travel, I ended up meeting a lot of stars from Hollywood. We had the tennis tournament in Monte Carlo, where even Frank Sinatra came along to that. Yeah, we had everyone. It's hard to make a list, but you know, you got Sigourney Weaver that you mentioned. We had Sybil Shepherd. We had Jane Seymour, Roger Moore, Sean Connery. Yeah, you name them. They were all attending Reebok events. They were all participating. And then you get to the point and you say, well, after that long journey, after the excitement and that the camaraderie, the passion that goes in it, a company, you can't do it with 2 people or 5 people. It takes thousands of people. It then begins to have lawyers, accountants, and you become a numbers company. Mm. And when you become a numbers company, it's better to be outside than inside.
Yeah.
And for me, we got to that point where I can still enjoy the company because my memory is what it is. And I got to the point where I was taking a flight maybe 2 or 3 times a month, going around the world, going visiting people. I did business class. I've only done first class on a few occasions, but you would arrive, be picked up by a limousine, driven to the best hotels. You would sit down with all the people. You would have meals. You would discuss 1 or 2 things, and then you're back on a plane again. And the excitement, the sitting down, 2 or 3 of you around the table saying, what are we going to do next? What's happening here? What's going on? Working sort of off the seat of your pants sometimes because you have to. Yeah, everything becomes very much paperwork, numbers. Where's the excitement?
Mm-hmm. Kind of lose the passion a little bit when
that's right.
You bring numbers into it. That's really sad. But what have you been doing in the meantime?
I don't think it's sad. I think it's progression. I think, if you're going to reach or achieve something, you will definitely sort of find that it's traveled on and you are not willing to take that particular route. Mm. You say, well, what am I...
What have you been doing? What have you been doing after leaving the company?
Well, after leaving the company, the first thing I wanted to do was put my feet up for a while. So I spent some time in Tenerife, which is a very nice place, but it's an island. So after a while, you do get rock happy. You think, what am I doing on the island? And I did get divorced from my first wife. We'd lost contact. We'd lost whatever. It took some time, but I remarried and we just traveled. my first wife didn't like traveling. And that in itself was sad because I had so many experiences, visited so many places. You know, I went into the palace in Monte Carlo and met Prince Rainier, and we had a glass of champagne. When you're doing that, I'd like to do it with somebody.
Yeah.
So that you've got that to share for the rest of your life.
Mm.
And so we just traveled around Europe. I've got so many friends in Europe. I mean, I would probably travel to Australia, but it's such a long way. It's not something you can just jump into the car. Whereas yesterday we were in England. We jumped into the car in north of England, and by evening we were down here in the middle of France. It's something you can do. I was talking about Italy, where we can just drive to Italy and meet our friend Umberto Colombo, and drive up to the top of Sacramonte and just sit there, and nice hotel up there called the Bourdican. So, I've been traveling a lot, but I wouldn't say not enjoying it. I enjoyed it, but not taking in the surroundings. What is it about when you travel to places? If you just do something and then go, you're not really seeing anything. Mm-hmm. Well, for the last 30 years, I've been seeing things, visiting people, and enjoying life.
I'm a little bit jealous of the fact that you're in Europe at the moment. You get to just travel, like get in a car, and it's like so close. Whereas I'm not a short hop, skip, and a jump.
Well, it would be, but COVID-19 is keeping that well down. We can't travel as much at this moment, but we'll be back again. Give us another 6 months, and I'm sure this will have a vaccine, and we'll be back into traveling.
I can't wait to travel, honestly, Joe. Like it's on my list of things to actually do, and especially going to Europe, Italy. I'm a huge history nerd, so I love going to all those places. I want to go to Germany, which is where my family's from. All these amazing countries. So much to do, so much to see, and yet COVID, I'm missing out yet.
But, you get on plane, yes,
soon, very soon.
However, I would say about COVID, what it is doing is it's pushing your business along rapidly.
Oh,
because now we need Zoom, we need all this. This is the meetings of the future, and without a doubt. And I've had a few of these. We had an avatar one. We were all sitting around as different images. Yeah, my image was about 30 years younger or whatever, but that was an interesting one, the avatar one. So where this is going, I mean, eventually we'll be doing this in 3D. It would be three-dimensional. It would be incredible. We'll be in each other's rooms. So yes, COVID has pushed this along rapidly and is probably taking your business, maybe it would have taken your business 10 years to get where it's now, but it's going. And that's the future.
100%. COVID for me has been a big blessing in disguise. Never would have thought I'd be even here speaking to you today, but alas, here I am, which is amazing. Honestly, I've really enjoyed this conversation and hearing your story, Joe. My final question for you is, this is my legacy question that I ask everyone at the end. So you've been able to reach the age of 100 and your friends have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Then ask me how in the world they got it. We'll just call it magic. But they've got it. They put something together and they've shown it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Well, I guess the wonderful thing is that you find the name. And I think it's all to do with the luck you've had. I think you remember your luck. You don't remember too much the bad times. So I've had so much luck that my legacy would be all the moments of good luck. The fact that I found the name Reebok in a dictionary that I'd won when I was 8 years old during the war, and it was American dictionary. So that's a piece of luck. I'd like to see Aztec. We produced Aztec. Aztec was a key, a fantastic key to being there. So for me, those are the legacies. And then, of course, we became the number one sports brand in sort of late 80s. We were the number one sports brand in the world. We'd overtaken Nike and Adidas. So I think that's the legacy. That's the, I can look back on it. And as I say, when you're doing it, you don't recognize it. You're taking steps slowly. You don't see it. But like I say, if you reach 100, there's a lot of richness and a lot of value when you're looking back. And you think, well, you wouldn't change those. You couldn't change those. But how lucky had I been to have had those, to have been able to do it and to meet all those people. So, yes, the legacy, my memory is a fantastic legacy as far as I'm concerned for me.
And I get to keep a part of it during this interview and keep it for forever. So, Joe Foster, thank you so much, sir, for your time, generosity, everything that you've done in the world, even before I was born. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story on the Storybox podcast today.
It's been a pleasure, Jay.